In this episode,
I've been able to knock off about £1,000 a year off the running costs.
I think a lot of installers would like to be the first point of contact.
The manufacturers tell you what they want you to do during a service. You need to check X, Y, and Z.
If I'm honest, I don't know.
my air source heat pump was installed and commissioned without weather compensation, which is really naughty.
I'm sure the manufacturer would be delighted to tell you how to switch weather compensation on. It's just going to be a bit of trial and error.
We're just replacing your gas or your oil boiler and providing heat to the home. Where it goes after that is it's kind of where Max's expertise really comes in that system design.
Some installers will see it as a cash cow.
I'm on the fence in this one. I'm not saying you definitely don't need them. You definitely do.
Popular today.
Welcome to another episode of Homeowners Q&A, where we dive into the most prosaic questions surrounding heat pumps and renewable heating. I'm your host, Mars, and today's episode is a really special one because we're streaming live. We've also got a fantastic panel with us today. We've got Joseph Burdon from Mitsubishi Electric, Max Waddingham from Good Energy, and Geoff, a homeowner and active member of the Renewable Heating Hub community. Welcome, everybody. So, in today's session, we'll be answering questions submitted by homeowners via the Renewable Heating Hub forums, as well as from emails and DMs that we've received over the past few months. And because we're live, we're also going to encourage viewers to submit questions using the chat feature, and our panel will do the best that they can to get them answered throughout the show. But before we get stuck in, we'd like to say a huge thank you to Mitsubishi Electric for sponsoring today's episode. Mitsubishi Electric is a leader in the production of energy-efficient residential heating solutions, and their EcoDan range of air source heat pumps offers a renewable, cost-effective heating option for homeowners looking to enhance their energy efficiency. Mitsubishi Electric's commitment goes beyond product innovation, focusing heavily on customer support and care. Their mission is to create a positive customer experience, ensuring that homeowners feel confident in their choice to upgrade to an efficient heating system. So let's jump straight into it. Joseph, let's start with you. Our first question comes from Rick, who asks, I recently read on the Renewable Heating Hub forums that skipping an annual heat pump service might void the warranty of my heat pump. Is this true? And does the manufacturer require service documentation and history to honour the warranty?
Thank you, Mars. I think the simple answer is yes. I think you'll find most terms and conditions of warranty or guarantee from the manufacturer will state that you need to have the appliance serviced every 12 months. There's generally a checklist or a schedule that they would expect. And with the commissioning record, there's generally a service logbook for your installer to complete those details as they go through every month. I think they do reserve the right to ask for proof of service within that warranty guarantee. And it's probably worth mentioning as well, if you have an unvented cylinder installed at the same time as your air source heat pump, there's likely a warranty on that as well, which has a separate service requirement on it as well. So a lot of people get both things done at the same time.
Now, I appreciate that. Obviously, you work at Mitsubishi Electric, and you can only answer this probably from your perspective. But the one thing that we've seen is that a homeowner gets a heat pump installed by a certain installer, and that installer may or may not go out of business, or they just choose not to actually get their servicing done with them in the future. Now, we actually did an episode where we focused on servicing a little bit, and the thing that cropped up is that different installers have different methodologies to actually performing the service. How does that potentially impact the warranty then, and how do you actually interpret that service history?
It's a good question, really. I mean, we have a servicing schedule, what's involved in there, cleaning your filters, cleaning your strainers, cleaning the evaporator coils, if you've got antifreeze, checking those levels. Skipping, obviously, we wouldn't recommend that. I'm from the gas world, really, where there's a lot of safety checks and combustion analysis done as well, so it's quite a lot simpler than that. I guess you could argue there's more to really check and service on the unvented cylinder side of things more than anything else. There should be a schedule or a checklist that each manufacturer would want within a service, but I would imagine there's a lot of similarities between all manufacturers, really. Don't know what Max kind of carries out on a service that would be any different, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So we service a couple of different brands of heat pump. Exactly as Joseph says there, the manufacturers tell you what they want you to do during a service. You need to check X, Y, and Z. Filters, glycol, visual inspection, checking for leaves and things like that, clogged in the coils at the back, or making sure that you've got a free runoff for your condensate, things like that. We generally do the cylinder and everything at the same time. But what I would say is any kind of installer worth their salt should be looking at what the manufacturer is requiring rather than just going off of their own kind of thoughts and feelings as to what they should be servicing. Because if it is to maintain a warranty, you do need to do it. And generally speaking, you need to have gone through a manufacturer's training course to be able to service that unit anyway, so you should know what that particular manufacturer is requiring.
So, Geoff, I'm going to put you on the spot. You've got a Mitsubishi heat pump. Do you get yours serviced every year?
Yes. One of the things I've seen on the forum is that there's a big variation in price. Some installers will see it as a cash cow. We're quite lucky in that the installer we used has provided a plan for servicing, which is actually on the reasonable end of the scale. We only really do it for peace of mind, although obviously it does at that point tick the warranty box as well. But I think it's also worth bearing in mind that it is a relatively simple system physically, so you just need to make sure that everything's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
While we're still on the subject of warranties, I think it's worth answering this particular question, which is quite interesting. So this homeowner asks, I'm curious about the warranty of my heat pump. Should I contact the manufacturer directly if something goes wrong, or should I always go through my installer first? And what level of support can I expect during the warranty period from my manufacturer? Joseph?
It's a good question. I think it could potentially differ. I think a lot of installers would like to be the first point of contact, certainly if they're maintaining that product as well throughout its life cycle. Quite a lot of engineers, if there was any work required under warranty, would do that on behalf of the manufacturer. But I guess they're looking at, an installation and then, a full life cycle of service, maintenance and customer for a long, long time. As a backup for that, you should really have contact details for your manufacturer. You mentioned earlier, like if an installer's not available or they've potentially gone out of business, you should have some contact details to reach out to the manufacturer. We would generally know quite quickly when you make contact with us whether we're looking at a heat pump fault or we're looking at something else. So sometimes we'll be doing a repair under warranty. It might be that there's other things that need doing, on the system itself or the secondary side, but you should have contact details and ways to reach your manufacturer as well. Some can offer remote assistance and support as well, which might not be warranty work after all. It might just be tweaking of some settings, or hot water's been turned off, you can turn it back on as well. We might need the installer in some instances to work on the system if it's not related to the product.
Do you need help understanding your heat pump? Then pick up a copy of From Zero to Heat Pump Hero, an essential guide offering practical advice and basic instructions for new heat pump owners to maximize system efficiency. Available in print and on Kindle, link in the description. But we have another question from a gentleman called Liam. Our heat pump seems to be running less efficiently than it did when we first installed it 3 years ago. Should I reach out to the manufacturer or the installer to assess the system? And what kind of remote diagnostics can manufacturers provide? Again, over to you, Joseph.
Okay, I'm popular today. So I'd like to think that you could reach out to whomever's maintaining that product, in the first instance. But if we assume that it's not being serviced and maintained, that's kind of the benefits of the servicing that we spoke about earlier. Those things over time can have an effect on performance, certainly strainers, filters, evaporator coils, as Matt said. So I would definitely reach out to them in the first instance. But again, the manufacturer should be able to be contacted to discuss those with them as well. In terms of remote support, I think that could vary. A lot of manufacturers, certainly if the heat pump is connected to the internet, generally have got some kind of remote service that they can log in and dial, and we can look at things in quite a lot of detail as well, and we can even change settings remotely if needed to be. We can solve probably 85-90% of all phone calls over the phone, to be fair. A lot of times we obviously talk about the efficiency of the heat pump, so I presume we're speaking about the energy monitoring side of things, because some people just maybe notice that maybe the heating isn't reacting as quick as it used to do, or maybe it's taking a little bit longer to get the hot water going as well. So not everybody looks at energy monitoring. Some people just look at how warm and comfortable is my home and how long is it taking to get up to temperature as well. That's kind of more where I live. I'm a warm and I'm uncomfortable.
Hey, Max, you said on a previous podcast that Good Energy obviously does a lot of remote monitoring. You guys are checking systems and seeing that. So do you rely on the manufacturer remote controls for that, or do you often fall on third-party controls to help you monitor these kind of things and correct things if things go wrong?
We're using a third-party setup on the monitoring platform. There's quite a few manufacturers that have really great kind of monitoring setups that specific to their kit, but I think when, as an installer, such as us, when you're dealing with a few different brands of heat pumps maybe, or you want a few different things, as an installer, you're interested in the whole system, not necessarily just the appliance itself. If we stuck to a manufacturer-specific monitoring platform, we'd only be able to potentially see what the heat pump can tell us, and for one particular brand. I think if you're looking at multiple brands, we certainly use third-party kit so that we can see what's going on there. The question there was about efficiency dropping. The heat pump might look at what's the flow rate going through the heat pump, what's my COP at any given time, what temperatures have I got on my curve. What it can't tell you is what does the secondary side, what does the heating circuit look like if you've got a hydraulically separated system or something. That usually needs kind of boots on the ground with eyes to look at it, or another way to look into the system that maybe just monitoring the heat pump couldn't give you.
What about you, Geoff? How do you keep tabs on your system?
I've got a relatively complex setup because I've got a number of different internet-connected gadgets and things like that, and I have a Home Assistant installation, which means that I can actually see real-time a lot of what's going on in the home, not just for the heat pump, but also for the solar PV system, for the electric car and charger and things like that, as well as various other bits and pieces. So I know that I have a great deal of visibility of what's going on, but at the same time, I'm not an expert on heat pumps. What I'm actually looking for is not the fine detail that Max, you were talking about with flow rates and so forth. I'm looking at the more general: is the system delivering what I'm actually trying to achieve?
You're listening to the Renewable Heating Hub Homeowners Q&A, empowering consumers with the knowledge they need to make smarter heating choices. Right, so let's pop on to the next question. So this homeowner asks, he says, my air source heat pump was installed and commissioned without weather compensation, which is really naughty. The flow temperature was set to 50 degrees centigrade, leading to really high running costs. How can I work with my installer to get this fixed? Max?
I think that's usually a mechanism to avoid callbacks because it's not necessarily warm or your radiator feels cold or something like that. In the first instance, if you kind of raise that with your installer, say, look, you're aware of weather compensation, you think it would be really suitable and you'd like to try it, I think they should have a responsibility to come and turn that on for you and tweak it. You know, the heat loss calculations they will have done for the property in order to size the heat pump should tell them that I'm guessing 50 degrees is the flow temperature required at the design outdoor temperature. So it's just finding the bottom of that curve, and you know, it might be 37, it might be 30 degrees at 15, 20 degrees outside temperature, but asking them to switch that on as a first. And if they really won't, I'm sure the manufacturer would be delighted to tell you how to switch weather compensation on. It's just going to be a bit of trial and error if it's something that you're having to do yourself and finding a sweet spot there. The key thing is with weather compensation, if that's all you're changing as a setting, you can't break your heat pump. You might whack your comfort out a little bit. You're not really going to increase your running costs if you're already on a fixed setting, so you could play with it and find a sweet spot. It's just what stance does your installer take in terms of, if you press the control, what liability do they then have if you accidentally put it onto cooling mode or something?
I think we're a prime example of that because we had our heat pump put in 6 years ago, and this is again something I've mentioned on several podcasts, but I'll do it again because I think it's well worth drumming that point across. For the first 2 years, we were running on a set point temperature on our system at 45 degrees. It was only after we started to do research, and because at the time, 6 years ago, there really wasn't very much information out there with regards to heat pumps, if you can believe that or not. We then started to hear about weather compensation. Our case was quite unique in that we bought our heat pump from the manufacturer directly. They were the ones that actually sorted out the installers, and it was the manufacturer that commissioned our heat pump. And when we called them 2 years down the line and said, why isn't our system set up to run weather compensation? They told us, well, our heat pump doesn't support weather compensation. Over time, I was given access to the back end. I was able to go through the settings, and lo and behold, when going through the actual settings, I found weather compensation. All the weather curves were there. We activated it, and the weather compensation works perfectly. We're probably unique in that, you know, the manufacturer themselves told us that this feature doesn't exist, and obviously it did. Joseph, what is the stance from Mitsubishi Electric with regards to weather comp and fixed point temperatures? Do you encourage all of your installers to always install systems with weather comp enabled?
Wouldn't disagree with anything Max said, to be fair. Big advocates for weather comp. You know, we have built-in automated weather compensation to our control methodology as well. Very few instances do we ever get an application that's designed to run on fixed flow. There are a few, but they're rare, and it's quite specific. We can change weather comp remotely, but we don't know what the system is designed to. So we would have to kind of say, let's do 50 degrees at -3 or -5 if you're in Scotland as one end of your weather compensation curve, 30, 35 degrees when it's 15 outside of the other, and see how you get on. You know, if you're warm, you're comfortable, and you want to drop that down a little bit, brilliant. If you're still warm and comfortable, and drop it down a bit more, but now you're not comfortable, you want to kind of move up somewhere in between. Your heat loss of your home isn't constant all year round, so you might as well save some energy and run it at slightly lower flow temperatures when you don't need to.
Have you got questions about heat pumps and renewables? Then head over to the forums at Renewable Heating Hub for practical advice from thousands of fellow homeowners and heat pump users. So let's jump on to another question. This homeowner says that they recently installed a heat pump and they are confused about how to monitor the efficiency of that heat pump. Their control panel, they say, is very basic, and the app that's been recommended by the manufacturer doesn't give them any suitable information to actually check and monitor their efficiency. Do the apps actually vary between manufacturers? And they're asking how they can better track their system performance. Max?
As far as I'm aware, every heat pump I've dealt with the control will have a mechanism to tell you efficiency. Now, how accurate that data is will vary by heat pump, and that will only show you, kind of call it box one, the efficiency of the appliance. It won't show you the efficiency of the whole system. You should certainly be able to see the consumption, which you'd see on your electricity meter, which you kind of have to fit with every install. But unless you've got a heat meter fitted with a particular monitoring system, open energy monitor or a passive monitoring system or something like that that's got a heat meter, if you don't have that, it's very hard to see at a glance what your energy out is. So you're going to be very reliant on the manufacturer control there telling you how that system's performing. But what I would say is, I mean, it's very easy to say this from my standpoint, but if your running costs are low or lower than you have been expected and you are comfortable, you don't necessarily need to know the efficiency of it. But if you are kind of that way inclined and you're very interested in what that efficiency is, again, speaking to the installer, and if you can't reach the installer, the manufacturer, and just figuring out a way to find the efficiency within your control is probably the way I'd recommend that. Otherwise, you're just stuck looking at what the consumption of the unit is, and then you'd have to use some fancy physics and feeling the heat on the pipes and figuring out the flow temperature to figure out the actual energy rate going into the property, and then you divide one by the other. But unless you drive a scientific calculator every day like I do, and I'm sure Joe does as well, probably better to just find a way to read that on a control.
So how do you monitor your efficiency, Geoff, and why do you do it?
To be totally honest, I'm not that concerned about the efficiency. I'd taken a look on the control panel of the box at various points and said, okay, yeah, I can see that over this hour, this day, this month, and this year, the efficiency has been such and such. But it really is back to the top level. What are you trying to achieve? That really concerns me. How much does it cost to keep the house at a reasonable temperature and everybody comfortable? That was a very straightforward one for me. With the combination of the solar array and the heat pump, I've been able to demonstrate to myself that I've been able to knock off about £1,000 a year off the running costs, and that's huge. Do I really worry that much about what the cop is? Not really, if I'm making that much of a saving.
Planning to install an air source heat pump? Then get your copy of Bodge Buster. It's packed with must-ask questions, real homeowner insights, and a practical guide for a smoother installation. Available in print and on Kindle. Link in the description. Question that we often find, and it's a bit of a reoccurring question. If I encounter an issue with my heat pump and it's a component failure and the actual heat pump is still under warranty, how quickly should I expect support from the manufacturer to get the replacement parts to me?
Some installers can just tell us what part that they require and we'll ship it to them. So on a day like today, you could probably have the part there tomorrow. We do have heat pumps in some quite rural locations as well, which just deliveries just dictate that they take a little bit longer to get there. Instead of tomorrow, it might be the day after or potentially after. But a lot of installers tend to keep a little stock of spares for that, and they would just replenish what they want. But yeah, if you had a component failure, we would issue you under warranty. It's just a case of shipping it to you. I would expect as the market gets bigger, you might start to see as well sort of like local wholesalers and merchants do what they do in the heating world now, which is stock a series of parts. We do get asked, what are your fast moving spares? The reality is not that many. We try and build it not to break in the first place.
When typically homeowners run into problems, it's not really the heat pump unit themselves. Sometimes it's the odd circuit board that goes. It is very, very rare for that to happen. It is usually the plumbing side of things that that goes pear-shaped. So Max, how quickly do you guys react to emergency cases like that? So you've got a customer, something's gone horribly wrong, it's December. How quickly can you get a team out there to actually assist the homeowners with?
The ops team, the technical team will always kind of triage. Let's say you've got a Samsung heat pump and it's flagging a 911, so the Legionella boost hasn't worked. We're not dropping everything and getting out to that because it happens once a week and we can see the temperature. Okay, we'll get out to you in a few days. If somebody's phoning us, there's vulnerability at the property, say young kids, elderly relatives or something like that, and the heating has just gone off or there's a leak or something like that, we might then be pulling somebody off another job and getting them out there straight away. So it really depends on the severity of what's going on. And then just to kind of follow up on Joe's point there as to parts, our guys will carry around not the most efficient things in the world, but fan heaters and things like that. So if somebody is experiencing a heating system outage and we have to go away and get parts, or we're there after hours and the local screw fix is closed and we can't go and get a pipe or something, or we have to wait a few days for a manufacturer component, we can at least supply some level of heat into at least one or two rooms into the house. And on the hot water side, maybe we can get the immersion up and running, but not necessarily the heat pump. So we triage it, we get there as quick as we can, depending on the severity of the issue. If we can't fix immediately, we find ways to still provide comfort.
Geoff, what would your perspective be on this? For argument's sake, touch wood, your system is running beautifully, but let's say for argument's sake, it's end of November, it's really cold outside, your heat pump just stops working and you don't know what's wrong. What is your expectation of the installer? And if the installer fails, what would your expectations be of the manufacturer?
I think the expectations should be exactly the same as any other homeowner. If you've got a problem with being comfortable, then there should be some way of tackling the immediate problem, and then once the emergency is sorted, then sorting out the underlying problem overall. To me, underlines the importance of having a reasonable relationship with your installer, which goes back to your choice of installer right at the beginning. And I would expect that where the installer's doing everything that they reasonably can to sort out the problem effectively, that the manufacturer should be providing the level of support that allows the installer to do what they need to do. And if the installer isn't doing what they should be doing, it's only then that I would expect the manufacturer to be stepping in and saying, okay, this is an edge case, we'll take over.
Is there a level of vetting to getting an installer that installs Mitsubishi Electric heat pumps? Does everybody that fits a Mitsubishi Electric heat pump as an installer have to have some sort of training on those units?
They don't have to have training, no. For them to be accredited, yes, they do. So we would want them to go through our level of accreditation. You can buy heat pumps through merchants and things like that, so we can't stop that. But in terms of having accreditation, yes, we would expect, I guess, a minimum competency. So design and application, installation and commissioning.
If an installer comes and fits a machine that they've just bought from a wholesaler somewhere, obviously the manufacturer has zero control over that person's installation. Is it a fair point to say that I have an installer come to my house, they propose to put in an EcoDan? Is it worth my while to go online and see whether they've actually been Mitsubishi Electric EcoDan accredited to actually install that heat pump? And if they aren't, does that then pose any warranty issues if they have, God forbid, botched the actual installation because they haven't had sufficient training to actually fit and commission your system?
It does have an impact on the length of warranty that we offer. We get the feedback from the homeowners, people calling our lines, for unhappy installations. There's obviously also governing bodies as well that vet the industry and look after that. There's a benefit to using an accredited installer, as a safety check, and then there's other levels above that where you get additional extended warranties and guarantees as well. I would imagine most manufacturers have got some kind of registered installer list that you can peruse or reach out to the manufacturer and check that.
Geoff, how did you go about finding your installer, and were they accredited?
Yes, they were accredited. We had probably sort of 6 or 7 companies coming and having a chat with us, and only 2 of those got to the point where they were going to provide some kind of heat loss calculations as a significant step towards the installing. And in a lot of cases, it was really obvious. If we were talking with someone who just simply wasn't listening, just waiting for us to stop talking so that they could tell us what they wanted to say, then after the install, why would we expect them to listen to what we wanted then? And the people that we did actually go with, they spent a lot more time listening to what we were saying.
You're listening to the Renewable Heating Hub Homeowners Q&A, empowering consumers with the knowledge they need to make smarter heating choices. Homeowners are becoming a lot more aware of heat pumps, and they have certain expectations now. As somebody that installs heat pumps, would you engage in a conversation and dialogue with them if you've said, we're adamant about fitting this system this way, the homeowner saying, well, actually, I don't, I'd rather do it this way? How flexible are you guys?
Up to an extent, I would say yes, we'll engage that conversation. And the extent is, I would say for us, it goes quite far. We're very flexible with homeowners. I think where we tend to run into problems is, there's always the odd person who's like, I want really great running costs, i.e. 35-degree flow temperature, but I want low installation costs, so I don't want to change my radiators. And it's like, well, we can't do that, so we've got to meet somewhere in the middle. Sometimes heat pump positioning is a bit of an issue with some people who want it, way down the garden. You might then need a split system, or locations that might need planning permission. For example, I don't want planning, but I want my heat pump on the flat roof at the front of my house, sort of things. Like, well, we can't do that without planning. We can't fudge numbers for sound calcs and things like that. What I would say is we absolutely have a dialogue with customers. We're not just saying your heat pump's going there and there alone. It's like, where are you thinking? Let's have a look. Our surveyors on site will be looking at the location saying, yeah, we think this will work. Or, okay, just to flag, you've got a window for your next door neighbour right there, so it might have a sound issue. Let's look at another location just in case. And we do try and figure out what the motivation for the customer is. Is it CO2 reduction, i.e. efficiency, reduction of energy coming from the grid, or is it just getting a system in at 55 degrees and then we can replace radiators over time and we can help out with a strategy? Okay, if you change these rooms first, you can then bring it down next year to 40 degrees, and then the year after. So yeah, we absolutely have a dialogue there and try and work up a plan with the customer.
This is exciting. We've received our first question via the chat. Max, this one's for you. They have just moved into the house that has a heat pump. In their previous properties had a gas boiler. And they're saying that, is it normal for their heat pump to be taking so long to heat up the home?
I would say that weather compensation is in effect here. The most simple way I can explain that piece is a boiler is throwing water out as hot as it kind of can, 70 degrees in some cases. You've got a lot of temperature in the small surface areas of your house, i.e. the radiators. It can heat that space up relatively quickly. The reason that heat pumps are so efficient is they don't come on at max throttle as hot as possible and heat the property up as quick as possible. What they do is they run, barbecue terminology, low and slow. They're trying to put energy into all the thermal mass in your house. And by thermal mass, I just mean stuff, bricks, furniture, tables. It's all absorbing the heat and then that's starting to radiate the heat out. Heat pumps are designed in such a way to be run pretty much always on. You just have a setback overnight and you just leave that heat pump on and your house will come up to a temperature and it will stay at a temperature and your running costs will be, generally speaking, lower than the equivalent use from a gas boiler. It's just getting used to that transition because it is moving from a system where you are flat out for a few hours a day to something that you just turn on and forget and then your home will heat up, especially this time of year. It was -1 here last night in Nottingham, so we're getting into the depths of it. It is going to take longer to heat up, but when it's there, instead of heating it up from cold, you're just putting in a little bit of energy to keep that heat at the level it's at rather than bringing it up all the way. There's plenty of analogies on watering cans and sieves and all sorts of stuff, but you're basically pouring as much water in as is coming out rather than having to fill that watering can up. So yes, it is normal. Stick with it for, I'd say, no more than a couple of days and it should settle, and as long as you've left it on and you've set your temperatures right in your thermostat, you will be warm, you'll be at a level that you're happy with, and then you should see the running costs start to level out. But they will be higher this time of year when it's starting to get cold.
That's a great point because we typically find it probably takes about, if the heating's completely off and the house has dropped to maybe 17 degrees, the temperatures outside drop. Typically takes about 36 hours for us to get to that comfort level. But then once you leave it on, it just takes over, and every single room, every single portion of the house actually remains at 21. Is that the case for you, Geoff? Do you guys run yours low and slow 24/7?
We have a setback during the night and then moving up to a slightly higher temperature for the daytime and then moving up to a slightly higher temperature again for the nighttime when we're less active. But it's only a couple of degrees either way.
Just for a balanced view there, Mars, as well. Don't recommend this, but if you wanted to, you could go to a fixed high flow temperature and use it like a boiler. You could bring your temperature up quickly. Not what I would recommend, but you could do that. Heat pumps can put out, an R32 unit quite comfortably 65 degrees in some cases, which is getting into boiler territory. So you could use it that way. You are just going to pay through the nose for running costs and not get the most out of the appliance. But if you are that way inclined and you are that sort of user, again, you could do that.
So we're going to wrap up this episode with the last question, which is probably one of the most contentious topics that I've certainly seen doing the rounds in the heat pump world. And that basically deals with hydraulic separation. So this is something that I've just seen so many arguments online amongst installers. I see that homeowners are getting quite involved in this because I think that a lot of installers in the early days have certainly defaulted to this. So this particular homeowner is asking, they've actually been quoted for a new heat pump system that involves some sort of hydraulic separation with a low loss header and a secondary pump. Is that something that you recommend? Is that something that Good Energy does when they install their systems as a default, Max?
If you are designing a system from scratch completely and you know every aspect of the property, there's no need. You can design in such a way that it's going to be perfectly efficient. If you're going into a deep retrofit, you're talking about having to pull up people's floors to see what pipe work there is. If they're on sections of microbore, what's the manifold look like, what's the pipe service? If it's not feasible to be bringing up people's floors and ripping the house apart to figure out what's there, sometimes you've got to put some hydraulic separation. So I'd say for our installations, if we can find out enough about the property to engineer it out, we absolutely will do that, but it's not always the case. I'm on the fence in this one. I'm not saying you definitely don't need them, you definitely do. I'm saying there are instances where you might not be able to gather enough information to say with a great degree of certainty that you don't need one, therefore it's not going to affect you. I have one here. I have a low loss header, got about a 60 meter combined run from my 12 kilowatt heat pump sat outside, bit of underfloor downstairs, and then radiators all around the house, and my annual efficiency is about 480%, I would say, and I'm running a max flow temperature of about 42 on my weather curve, so it works pretty well with separation.
So tell us, Geoff, did you guys go down the hydraulic separation route?
If I'm honest, I don't know. This comes back to that point that was made several times before about what are you trying to achieve? If there's a low loss header there, I don't know about it. I suspect not. If there is one in there, then I have a high degree of confidence that it was just sensible for the design for the particular retrofit.
It's an excellent point. It kind of reiterates what Max said in terms of, if something was put in and if your system is running efficiently and you're happy with it, it kind of makes very little difference whether you have or haven't got one. Joe, just last question to you to wrap things up. Is it something that you agree with Max on, in that Mitsubishi Electric stance on low loss headers and or any hydraulic separation would be a case by case instance, or do you guys always recommend having one as some sort of fallback redundancy?
I think Max's answer is very sensible. What's the application and what are you trying to achieve? If you take a step back, like from the heat pump's perspective, we're giving you a minimum and maximum flow rate range for that heat pump. If you can achieve the higher end of the flow rates without hydraulic separation, then you can do that. If you can't, then that's where low loss headers and buffer vessels come in. You've got minimum water requirements for defrost cycling, so defrosting the heat pump when there's ice build-up outside, and there's a minimum output for the unit as well. So some people make sure there's a minimum output achieved by using a buffer vessel. We're entering into a market now where people are using buffer vessels to store energy at cheap times as well. So they're advocates of buffers. So I think really looking at the application and what you're trying to achieve, that's your starting point. The manufacturer can always give you the windows where the heat pump, what it can and can't do. You design it around that. And like Max says, Max is designing the whole system. The heat pump's providing the heat. It's probably the simpler job, to be fair. We're just replacing your gas or your oil boiler and providing heat to the home. Where it goes after that is kind of where Max's expertise really comes in that system design.
Thank you to everyone for tuning into this episode of Homeowners Q&A, and a big thank you to our panel, Joseph, Max and Geoff, for sharing their insights. And of course, we'd like to give a special word of thanks to Mitsubishi Electric for sponsoring today's session. Until next time, stay warm, stay green, stay tuned. Goodbye, everybody.